Have you ever felt that the more you love someone, the less you recognize yourself? That moment when you look in the mirror and wonder, where did the person I used to be go? Stay with me for the next few minutes, because we're going to explore a truth that can transform not only your relationships, but your entire life. Imagine being able to love deeply without dissolving into the other person. Imagine a relationship where there isn't that constant fear of losing your identity, your essence, your dreams. Sounds impossible? Carl Jung, one of the most revolutionary psychologists in history, discovered the key to this balance, and today we're going to immerse ourselves in his wisdom. Love is perhaps the most powerful experience we can have as human beings. It elevates us, inspires us, transforms us. But it can also become an invisible prison if we don't understand how to navigate it correctly. And this is where Jung's teachings become invaluable. Jung understood something fundamental that most of us ignore. To truly love another, you must first know and love yourself. We're not talking about that superficial self-love promoted on social media. Jung was referring to something much deeper. The process of individuation, that internal journey toward the center of your most authentic self. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you changed your opinions, your desires, or even your dreams to please someone you love? How many times have you suppressed your inner voice because you feared rejection or conflict? If you're like most people, you've probably done it more times than you'd like to admit. Jung observed this pattern over and over in his patients, brilliant, capable people with enormous potential who had become shadows of themselves within their relationships. Not because their partners were toxic or manipulative, but because they had lost connection with their own center, with that internal core that Jung called the self. The problem, according to Jung, is that many of us seek in others what we lack within. We project onto our partners unrecognized parts of ourselves, particularly those we've repressed into the shadow. The shadow, that Jungian concept representing everything we don't want to see about ourselves, plays a crucial role in our relationships. When you haven't integrated your shadow, when you haven't had the courage to look at those uncomfortable parts of yourself, you'll inevitably seek them out or project them onto the other person. And here begins the dangerous dance that can lead you to lose yourself in the process of loving. Imagine Maria, a woman who was always the good girl, disciplined, responsible, always doing the right thing. Her shadow contains all that rebelliousness, that wild freedom she never allowed herself to express. When Maria meets Carlos, a free spirit who lives intensely, she feels immediately attracted. But it's not just attraction, it's fascination. She sees in him something she secretly yearns for herself. At first, this dynamic seems perfect. Carlos brings spontaneity to Maria's ordered life. She brings stability to his chaos. They complement each other. But over time, what she once admired begins to irritate her. Carlos's spontaneity now seems like irresponsibility. His freedom, selfishness. What has changed? Nothing and everything. The initial projection is fading, and Maria now faces not just Carlos, but her own unintegrated shadow. This is the point where many relationships break. We blame the other person for what is actually our pending internal work. Jung was very clear about this. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. How do we break this cycle? How do we love without losing ourselves? Jung's answer is revolutionary. Through the process of individuation. Individuation doesn't mean individualism or selfishness. It's the process of becoming a complete, integrated individual who has reconciled the different parts of their psyche. When you embark on this process, you begin to relate to others not from need or lack, but from fullness. You don't seek someone to complete you because you're on the path to completing yourself. You don't project your shadows onto the other person because you're learning to integrate them. This is the foundation of what Jung would consider a healthy and true relationship. But let's be honest, this path isn't easy. It takes courage to look inside yourself and face what you find there. It requires humility to recognize your projections and work on them. It requires patience, because individuation is a lifelong process. not a destination you reach once and for all. One of the most powerful tools Jung offered us for this journey is the relationship with our unconscious. Unlike Freud, who saw the unconscious primarily as a repository of repressed desires, Jung considered it a source of wisdom and creativity. Through dreams, active imagination, and other techniques, we can establish a dialogue with those deep parts of ourselves that have much to teach us. This internal dialogue fundamentally changes how we relate to others. When you learn to listen to your own inner voice, you become less susceptible to losing yourself in the expectations or desires of another person. You develop what Jung would call an internal axis, a psychological center of gravity that keeps you stable even in the most intense emotional storms. Think about the people you know who seem to stay true to themselves even in intense relationships. It's not that they're cold or distant. They're often capable of much deeper intimacy and surrender precisely because they're not afraid of losing themselves. They've developed that internal axis, that connection with their self, that allows them to get close without dissolving. Jung also told us about archetypes, those primordial images that inhabit our collective unconscious. Two archetypes in particular play a crucial role in our romantic relationships: the anima and the animus. The anima represents the feminine aspect in a man's psyche, while the animus represents the masculine aspect in a woman's psyche. When we haven't adequately integrated these archetypes, we tend to project them onto our partners, expecting them to embody these idealized internal images. A man who hasn't developed a healthy relationship with his anima may idealize his partner, turning her into a kind of goddess or muse, only to feel bitterly disappointed when she inevitably shows her humanity. A woman who hasn't integrated her animus may seek in her partner a strength or authority that she actually needs to develop within herself. This is another mechanism by which we lose ourselves in relationships. We confuse the real person in front of us with the archetypal image we carry within. The way out of this trap is, again, internal work. By integrating these aspects of our psyche, we free our partners from the impossible burden of having to embody our projections. Now, all this might sound too theoretical, too abstract. How does it translate into everyday life? What concrete steps can you take to love without losing yourself? First, develop a regular practice of self-reflection. It could be meditation, journal writing, dream work, or any activity that helps you maintain that internal dialogue alive. The important thing is to create a space where you can hear your inner voice without the constant noise of the outside world. Second, pay attention to your intense emotional reactions. When something deeply irritates you about your partner, ask yourself, what part of me is manifesting here? What is this irritation showing me about myself? As Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Third, cultivate relationships and passions outside your main relationship. Not out of lack of commitment, but precisely to keep your individuality alive. Jung firmly believed that a healthy relationship occurs between two complete individuals, not between two half-people seeking to complete each other. Fourth, learn to recognize and name your projections. When you find yourself excessively idealizing your partner, or conversely, demonizing them, it's a clear sign you're projecting. Remember that the other person is as human, as complex, and as imperfect as you are. Fifth, practice authentic communication. This means expressing your true feelings and needs, even when you fear they might cause conflict or rejection. Individuation requires authenticity, and healthy relationships are nourished by it. One of the biggest obstacles on this path is fear. Fear of loneliness, fear of rejection, fear of discovering aspects of ourselves that we prefer to keep hidden. Jung deeply understood this fear, but he also knew that true growth only occurs when we dare to face it. He who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens, Jung said. And this awakening, though sometimes painful, is what allows us to love in a way that doesn't diminish us, but expands us. Imagine a relationship where you don't need to pretend to be someone you're not. where you don't have to repress parts of yourself to keep the peace, where you can share your fears, your dreams, your shadows, and be received with understanding and love. This is what's possible when two people are on their own path of individuation. It's not about an unattainable ideal state. It's about an ongoing process, a dance between union and separation, between the I and the we. And like any dance, it requires practice, patience, and the willingness to stumble sometimes. Jung also told us about the concept of synchronicity, those seemingly coincidental but meaningful moments that seem to guide us on our path. Many times, the people who enter our lives do so precisely to show us something we need to learn about ourselves. From this perspective, even the most difficult or painful relationships can be seen as opportunities for growth. Not because we should remain in harmful situations, but because each interaction, each conflict, each broken heart can lead us more deeply toward our true self if we're willing to do the internal work. Think about that past relationship that left you devastated. What did it show you about yourself? What parts of you came to light that perhaps you hadn't seen before? In Jungian psychology, even our greatest pains contain seeds of transformation. Now, let's talk about something many fear: boundaries. Establishing healthy boundaries is not an act of selfishness or lack of love. It is, in fact, an act of deep respect both toward yourself and toward the other. When you don't have clear boundaries, you not only lose yourself in the relationship, but you also burden your partner with impossible expectations. Jung understood that boundaries are essential for healthy psychological development. Without them, there is the constant danger of what he called psychic inflation, that state in which we lose sight of where we end and where the other begins, or worse yet, where the ego ends and where the unconscious begins. In relationships, this confusion of boundaries can manifest in many ways, from codependency to excessive control, from extreme submission to domination. All are ways of losing balance, of losing that vital connection with your own center. The good news is that, like everything in Jungian psychology, boundaries are not something you must create from nothing. They already exist within you, as an innate wisdom that only needs to be recognized and honored. Your body knows when a boundary has been crossed. It tenses, it contracts, it gives you signals. Your heart knows when something is not aligned with your deepest values. Your soul knows when you're betraying your truth. The work, then, is not so much about establishing boundaries from a position of fear or defense, but learning to listen to and honor those internal signals that are already there. It's an act of deep self-respect that paradoxically allows you to give yourself more fully in your relationships because you do it from freedom, not from need. Jung also told us about the concept of the wound. We all carry wounds from our childhood, from our first relationships, from past experiences. These wounds, if not recognized and worked on, can deeply distort our ability to relate healthily. Perhaps you grew up in a home where love was conditioned on good behavior, and now you unconsciously seek to earn your partner's love through constant sacrifice. Or maybe you experienced early abandonment, and now you have a paralyzing fear of intimacy, always anticipating the inevitable loss. Jung would invite us to look at these wounds not as defects or weaknesses, but as portals to greater awareness. The light only enters through the wounds, he said. By recognizing and working with our wounds, we not only heal, but we access a depth and wisdom that would otherwise remain hidden. This work with the wound is essential to loving without losing yourself. Because when you operate from an unconscious wound, you're not really present in the current relationship. You're constantly reacting to ghosts from the past, to old fears, to learned patterns that may no longer serve you. Individuation involves recognizing these patterns, understanding their roots, and gradually transcending them. Not to eliminate the wound completely, Jung didn't believe this was possible or even desirable, but to integrate it into a larger whole, transforming it from a source of unconscious suffering to a source of conscious compassion and wisdom. Imagine being able to enter a relationship not from the need to heal old wounds through the other, but from the fullness of someone who has made peace with their past. Imagine the kind of connection that would be possible then, free from unconscious projections, free from the burden of impossible expectations, free to see and love the other as they truly are. This brings us to another fundamental Jungian concept, the persona. The persona is the mask we present to the world, the social role we play. It is not inherently negative. In fact, it is necessary for life in society. The problem arises when we identify so much with our persona that we lose contact with our authentic self. In relationships, especially those where we fear rejection, it's tempting to show only those parts of ourselves that we believe will be accepted or valued. Over time, this mask can become so habitual that we forget who we really are beneath it. Jung warned us about the danger of confusing the persona with the self. When you enter a relationship presenting only your mask, you're laying the groundwork for losing yourself. Because it's not really you who is being loved and seen, but the image you've created. Individuation involves recognizing your persona for what it is, a useful but limited interface with the world, and developing a more direct relationship with your authentic self. This doesn't mean discarding the persona completely, which Jung would consider imprudent and potentially psychologically dangerous, but rather making it more transparent, more permeable to your inner truth. In a healthy relationship, according to Jung, there is space for the persona, that social and adaptive aspect of ourselves, but also for something much deeper, an encounter between two souls, two authentic beings who recognize each other beyond the masks. This type of encounter is rare, but transformative. It's what Jung would call an alchemical relationship, where both people not only see each other authentically, but mutually catalyze each other's growth and transformation. Alchemy, that ancient tradition that so fascinated Jung, wasn't really about turning lead into gold, but about the transformation of being. Jung saw in deep relationships a similar process, a crucible where the crudest and least developed parts of ourselves can be transformed through the fire of love, consciousness, and shared work. This is perhaps the deepest gift of a true relationship. Not that it completes you, but that it challenges you to complete yourself. Not that it saves you, but that it invites you to find your own salvation. Not that it defines you, but that it reflects you so that you can define yourself. And here we come to a beautiful paradox that Jung deeply understood. It is only when you are willing to be completely yourself, with all your flaws, shadows, and wounds, that you can experience true intimacy. And it is only when you are willing to allow the other to be completely themselves that you can truly love. What would your life be like if you could love like this? What would your relationships be like if you could be present in them, not from need or fear, but from the fullness of your being? How would your experience change if you could give without depleting yourself, receive without losing yourself, and remain connected to your own center, even in the most intense moments of union with another? Jung invites us to a form of love that doesn't diminish us but expands us. A love that doesn't require us to sacrifice essential parts of ourselves, but challenges us to more fully integrate all our dimensions. A love that doesn't trap us but frees us. This is not an unattainable romantic ideal. It's a real possibility, a path that's available to anyone who's willing to do the internal work it requires. And although that work may sometimes be painful and challenging, the prize, a life lived from authenticity and relationships based on genuine connection, is worth every moment of effort. As Jung himself said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The question is, are you willing to transform? Are you willing to embark on that journey of discovery that can lead you not only to love another more deeply, but to recognize and love all the dimensions of yourself? Because in the end, that's the true key to loving without losing yourself. It's not finding the perfect person or the perfect relationship, but undertaking that heroic journey to the center of your own being, where you'll discover that you are much vaster, more complex, and more complete than you ever imagined. And from that completeness, from that connection with your own center, you can extend your hand to another, not to complete yourself, but to share the fullness of who you are, not to lose yourself in them, but to find yourself more deeply through the sacred mirror they offer. This is what Jung offers us, not just a theory of the psyche, but a map for the soul. A path that leads us not away from others, but toward a more authentic and transformative connection with them. A path that invites us not to reject love for fear of losing ourselves, but to love from a place of such authenticity that losing ourselves is no longer a possibility. If this message resonated with you, if you found yourself nodding, or perhaps even with tears in your eyes, recognizing some truth you've been feeling for a long time but couldn't name, I invite you to take the next step. Not just to listen to these words, but to put them into action in your life. Begin today to pay more attention to that inner voice we often ignore in favor of external expectations. Begin to observe your relationships with new eyes, asking yourself, where am I projecting? Where am I losing myself? What parts of myself am I repressing or denying? And remember that you're not alone on this path. Jung showed us that although the journey of individuation is deeply personal, it is also deeply universal. We are all in this process of becoming more fully who we are. We are all learning to love without losing ourselves. If this video has helped you to see your relationships or yourself in a new way, share it with someone you think might also benefit. Sometimes, a simple conversation, a moment of shared recognition, can be the catalyst for profound transformation. And if you'd like to explore these ideas further, if you'd like to deepen your own process of individuation, let me know in the comments. This is just the beginning of a conversation that could change not only how you love, but how you live every aspect of your life. Remember, the path to true love doesn't take you away from yourself. It leads you more deeply toward your own center. And it is from that center, from that connection with your most authentic self, that you can extend your hand to another and say, I see you, I recognize you, I love you, not because I need you to complete me, but because I choose to share with you the fullness of who I am. If this message touched something in you, make sure to leave your like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos, where we'll continue exploring the depths of the human psyche and the art of living with greater consciousness and authenticity. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time.